Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's a lovely evening, and I'm so glad you joined us. My name is Ramona Hattendorf. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Civic Engagement at the ARC of King County, and I am so glad to have Jay Kim, who's a member of our staff, and Tori Gilbertson, who is a professional who is graciously joining us tonight. Our presentation is all about cerebral palsy. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about why we're doing this, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jay and Tori. So about this series, this is part of our Understanding Disability series, and it's actually one of three that we are producing for the state's Inclusionary Practices Technical Assistance Network, which is quite a mouthful. It's IPTN for short. This is a technical assistance, a professional development series of classes being done by many different partners across the state. And one of them is the Family Engagement Collaborative. And the ARC at King County, we're a member of the Family Engagement Collaborative. And so some of the other series are on this slide. We have Understanding Disability, it's the series. Also Insights on Supporting Families and Navigating Schools. And we hope you can check those out and you can take any of the classes that you are interested in. And then just real quickly, who we are. So the ARC of King County promotes and protects the rights of people with intellectual and other developmental disabilities so we can all live, learn, work, and play in the community. The ARC is driven by the fundamental belief that everyone deserves to write their own life story. And that means real access to education, meaningful employment, quality healthcare, and genuine community connections. At our chapter, we have many different services. We do a lot of information and family support, and that can include anything from special education device to housing stability, all sorts of things. We also have, for adults, we have a supported living, which is a community residential program, and we have a public policy and civic engagement program. So also, there's some links on this slide. Feel free to check us out if you need any services. If you are not in King County and you have questions, you can still go ahead and send an email to ask ARCA King County because we have people. Jay, Jay's the key person who sends out all the referrals. If we don't know what it is, we will find somebody who can help you. We can refer out to maybe somebody who's in your area. So do feel free to reach out even if you aren't in County. And with that, I am going to hand this over to Dr. Gilbertson and to Jay Kim. Thank you so much for being here and take it away.
I, if Jay, if you're going to jump in, I please interrupt me. But otherwise, since we've already gotten through the ARC King County, we're going to talk about what is CP, the types of CP. CP standing for cerebral or cerebral palsy, either work just fine. And oh, there we go. So we'll talk a lot more about CP during the end after we get through all the good stuff about the ARC and wonderful programs that they offer and all of that. So Jay, I'm not sure if you're using a communication device. You're on mute. I don't know if that matters or not if you're not ready.
I bet she'll pipe in any second.
I assumed as much. I just noticed the mute thing and didn't.
I worry about that sometimes too, because she wouldn't know if she was mute. Like we would all like be talking, it happened to any of us, so we wouldn't know we were muted. Oh, I was gonna do that. Well, this is the part that oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, take it from here, Jay. Sorry. What was that whole planning meeting for?
Rachel, are you going to jump in?
Oh, agenda. Okay. Why are we here? This is what we're covering today, and we've already done this. We're going to talk about what is CP, the types of CP, impairments found with CP. We're going to talk about assumptions and interventions. And then Jay's going to share her story of being a person with cerebral palsy. And then we're going to talk about some resources at the end. And it's a small crowd, but we really encourage questions, conversation. Feel free to jump in, interrupt us. We'd love to hear from you. We are here today because when we talk about intellectual and developmental disability, we're talking about a number of different conditions or diagnoses or ways of being. We often hear about autism, we often hear about Down syndrome and other related conditions, but we don't talk nearly as much about cerebral palsy. We don't hear about that population. I find as a professional in the field, I work with significantly less parents with that diagnosis, and that there's less resources out there than there are for other diagnoses or other conditions. So this presentation, in addition to being for the purposes that Ramona shared earlier, is a way for us to start to narrow that gap and to start to fill in the gap, I would say, and help start conversation and keep conversation going about people with cerebral palsy and their families and what they need and how we can support them. So that's why we're here today. Annika, it's good to see you. I think Ramona already sort of said this, but our mission at the ARC is to promote and protect the rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities so they can live, learn, work, and play in the community, improving the quality of life for us all. And we feel really strongly about that. All right, Tori, you're up.
All right, thank you so much. So cerebral palsy, I'll keep calling it CP for the rest of this, but is a group of permanent, non-progressive disorders involving movement and posture that come from a brain injury either before birth or shortly thereafter. And it is just a range of different things that, whether it's physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, we'll talk about all the different types of disabilities. And they also vary on how involved any particular individual is, how severe any of either the physical or intellectual disabilities may be in any one person. And just because there may be severe physical disabilities, there may be no intellectual disabilities, or vice versa, all as a result of CP. Next slide. So there are four main types of CP. The first is spastic. It is the most prevalent, and it is characterized by very stiff muscles. That spasticity, by definition, is kind of a velocity dependent tightness. So the quicker you try to move somebody or they try to move themselves, the tighter those muscles feel. If you try to do so nice and slowly, there tends to be a little bit more ability to move. And then the dyskinetic is involuntary movements. Can either be slow and writhing like athetoid movements, or they can be a little bit more rapid and jerky, which is choreoathetosis. Then there's ataxic, which is typically characterized by balance and coordination issues, resulting in more unsteady movements and difficulty with other motor tasks. And then, of course, there's the mixed type CP, where it can be parts of any of the previous three that we just talked about. And one component or one type may be a little bit more predominant in its presentation in mixed type CP. So common impairments along with the physical disabilities that we do tend to see with CP, and not everybody has these. It can be in some people, cannot be in some people, and again, the severity varies with this as well. But seizure disorders, vision problems, feeding or swallowing difficulties, speech and language disorders, behavior and or emotional issues, and then we did talk about some musculoskeletal issues, but I'll go into a little bit more detail with that, in terms of just joint weakness, joint deformities. Some joints get so stiff that they just really are stuck in that position. And then different skeletal problems with the trunk, spine, can result and look progressive over time, just because as children age, they might collapse a little bit more into different postures or whatever. And but it's really not progressive. That's the key with CP, non-progressive. So there are a lot of assumptions that we get into with people with CP, and one of the things that I tell all of my students at the university, if you've seen one child with cerebral palsy, you've seen one child with cerebral palsy. And there are a lot of children and individuals out there that have CP that people just assume have an intellectual disability, maybe because they are unable to speak. But that is also an assumption that because you have cerebral palsy, you're unable to speak. That is not the case for a lot of people. Another assumption, just that there's uniformity of symptoms. It can totally vary. Some people are impacted with both of their legs. Some are impacted with one arm and one leg on the same side of the body. Some both legs and one arm. Some all four extremities. Some just one extremity. So there is no uniformity of symptoms. And not all individuals with CP use a wheelchair for mobility. Yes, there are many who do, but that is something that is not a one-size-fits-all. I know many people who are fully independent, who have cerebral palsy, who have full-time jobs, who cook, clean, and do all their grocery shopping for themselves, all the things. And there are not necessarily social limitations. Many of those social limitations are, in my opinion, societal, and people are afraid to be patient and interact with people with cerebral palsy, but you give them time and the ability, and there should be no social limitations. Yes, it's true that some individuals with CP may experience intellectual disabilities that may contribute to learning difficulties, but not all. It's just, it varies. Just like any of the rest of the population. Some people are a lot quicker to pick things up. Some are a little bit slower to pick certain things up. Some are a lot handier with some things. Some are a lot handier with other things. Same thing with people with CP. It is just a huge, very, very wide spectrum across all different aspects. So I love that little bubble at the very bottom right there. Always assume competence. That is the best assumption for people with cerebral palsy, is to assume that they are capable of a lot more than what you might think just by looking at them for a minute, and always let them prove you wrong. Next slide. So now we'll talk about the different therapeutic interventions for individuals with CP, children with CP. They may see any of these providers: physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, or prosthetist orthotists. And though each of the four different disciplines has kind of their focus, there is one thing that is uniform across all the rehabilitation specialties, and that is the focus on quality of life considerations and independence. And to accomplish that, they all involve the family to do the goal planning, and most of them will have home exercise programs or usage requirements for devices or whatever, or usage guidelines. I shouldn't say requirements, I should say guidelines for the different devices. And now we'll get into each of the individual disciplines and kind of maybe a little bit more what their focus might be, since we already got the broad pieces for all. So physical therapy starts in infancy for some, working on just basic movement, posture, even parental education, handling. Can start working on the developmental milestones like sitting, crawling, walking, rolling, all the things. And then as children get older, start working a lot more on posture and mobility. Not all children with cerebral palsy will walk, and so physical therapists are able to kind of start to identify who is likely to be a walker and who is not, and working towards those skills. But we also always, throughout the lifespan, work on positioning and equipment needs, whether that is seating, bathing, mobility issues, whether it's walkers, crutches, the wheelchair, whatever it might be. And then as children get older and older, we start working or continue working on posture, but then might start working a little bit more on strength, balance, mobility, and coordination, especially if they have a specific interest, a sport that they want to participate in, whatever. We might really work specifically with those skills that are desired and needed by that child. Another rehab discipline is occupational therapy, and they also work a lot with equipment needs, positioning needs. Occupational therapists will get into more adaptive equipment, things to help you perform different tasks. OTs will also work on sensory processing. If children have a hard time, maybe they're hypersensitive to things, working on some desensitization techniques. OT also may work on visual motor skills, eye tracking, and etc. Just like PT, they'll work on posture and mobility as well. And then OTs will also work a lot on socialization. And then as children get older, OT might start focusing a little bit more on independence with dressing, hygiene, eating, all those other things that we call activities of daily living. And they may help with people developing routines to just help them manage their life a little bit better. Then we get into our speech language pathology friends. I love our SLPs. Well, I love all the rehab disciplines. Let's be perfectly honest. But SLPs work really closely with cognitive skills, whether it's memory, whether it's the ability to multitask, plan, executive functions, all the things. If you're thinking, SLPs might help you come to a better way to do that thinking. And then, of course, it's right there in the name, speech, language pathology. So they also work on communication, whether that is through expressive communication, using their voice and working on speech and articulation, or using an augmentative assistive communication device, whether that be low tech like a letter board that people point to different letters or words on a board, or using more high tech communication devices that you input different commands and then it will have actually a voice output for them. But also just making choices is huge with language as well. And then they also work on receptive communication, making sure people understand what they're hearing correctly as well, and be able to understand what that may mean. SLPs also work on breathing, swallowing, eating, and just like OT, they will work on routines as well. The next rehab discipline that you may run into, or children with CP may get services from are people in the prosthetics and orthotics profession. CPOs are what they're called, certified prosthetist orthotists. And their biggest concern is biomechanical alignment and comfort with different bracing that may be utilized, whether that is for the trunk, ankles, feet, very common for children, especially if a leg or both legs are impacted by the cerebral palsy. Some children with the wrists have high tone and kind of have a clenched fist, so they can work on keeping that hand open, which helps with many other things. And these braces that may be provided may be universal, kind of an off-the-shelf sort of thing, or it may be a custom fabrication where the child is actually casted specifically, and then the orthotist takes that back to the lab and creates a very custom fit orthosis or orthoses, if there's more than one, for whatever joint or joints they may be needing to help correct and create better biomechanical alignment. All with the intention of helping with postural control, support, mobility, and comfort with mobility as well. And I think that's all the rehab disciplines. So yay, now it's time for Jay's story. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a video to go along with this that should be playing any moment.
There's not a video. Jay's just going to tell her story.
Oh, right, my bad.
No, that's okay.
My apologies, Jay.
Hi everyone, my name is Jay. I'm the Information and Referral Program Manager at the ARC of King County. I use she, her pronoun. I have cerebral palsy. I am in a powerized wheelchair and utilize a communication device to speak. I'm so glad to be there and share my story with you. When my family moved to the United States when I was 9, the school that I was placed in decided to put me in a special education class, Learning Resource Center 2, and I stayed in LRC until high school. They didn't evaluate me based on my knowledge. They assumed that I wasn't able to learn like any other students because of my disabilities. Teachers had me play games or watch movies that were about life skills. I barely did any academic work. I remember we had a circle time where we talked about things like which day it was. Although Lorcy taught me a variety of things, such as how to be independent and do things by myself, I unknowingly lost a chance to learn academic material, and it feels like I have a hole in my education. I wasn't given a communication device until 9th grade. I needed to point to each letter on the tray board. It was very frustrating because it was a very slow process, as people would have guessed what I wanted to say after pointing to a few letters. It would have been so much easier if I had a communication device earlier. When I had subs for my aides, they thought that I was acting out. They didn't know me, and I tend to move my body wildly as I'm doing something due to my disabilities. In my senior year, I talked to my transition specialist, and I decided to go to college, which was what I hoped for. My EP by then was focused on my graduation requirements because I needed adjustments, because I couldn't take art language classes and took other classes instead. My transition specialist helped me to apply and get set up at Bellevue College, where I transferred from. When I was at Bellevue College, the school supported and accommodated me in whatever ways they could. They were built based on social model of disability. They provided me with a person who took my notes and helped me to participate in class. However, When I first came to the University of Washington, I faced a lot of challenges as a disabled student. The Disability Resource for Students drives did not allow me to have my scribe in classes as one of my accommodations at first because they did not have this kind of service. I tried to make it work for 3 months by explaining to them why I needed aid. I called the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and I invited Beth, my scribe, to join me in a meeting at the Disability Resources for Students Center. We explained what she does for me in classes and showed them how much it takes for me to talk on my device without her support. After they had a conversation with me without Beth present, they finally accepted my request because they could understand my system. In one of my Bachelor of Social Work classes, Robin Tatsuda, who now is our former executive director, came to talk about disability. We sort of knew each other from a while back, but not really. The ARC sounded like a great place, so I decided to do my social work practicum internship there, and that was how I landed here. Because of my cerebral palsy, I cannot verbally speak. I email to communicate or set up in-person appointments where people can read from my communication device. I expressed myself and communicate through a device. In the end, it taught me how to advocate myself in a way that most people can't. When I was young, I wished that my parents could support me because adults were hard to deal with, even though most adults were nice. However, now that I think about it, my life would have been different if they advocated for me. I believe that we don't talk about what we would want in our lives, even though we have rights to make our own decisions like everyone else. I have a disability and people don't ask me what I want even though I'm an adult, which is really frustrating and depressing. However, I think with the right type of support, your loved one can live a life they want. Because of this reason, I majored in social work, and now I get to support people with disabilities and their families navigating through all of these difficult systems through my work at the ARC.
I was about to say, is that the end of your story? But I know it's not the end of the story. You're just at the beginning of your story. Ramona, can you flip to the next slide? Oh.
We
Jay,
have a number of virtual support groups for parents and caregivers in King County raising sons and daughters with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Share resources, ask questions, celebrate successes, and vent frustrations. You can find those on our community calendar. Like our Coffee and Conversation is a support group for parents of children with disabilities and meets virtually every Friday. We have Coffee and Conversation for Spanish-speaking parents as well. Also, we have Silver Tsunami Support Group for senior parents. Those groups are informal, and you can just join in whenever you would like. And then there are some additional resources like Kin Child Ental Area CP Parent and Caregiver Support Group. They're not our resources, but we just listed them for you to look through. Lastly, here are book recommendations by parent and author Shanita Stone. We encourage you to check those in her books out. She writes children's books with disabled people in them, which is amazing. So yeah.
I love that you ended with "so yeah," because that's how you talk. That's great.
I always feel like I'm one of those not great adults that Jay had interactions with when she was a kid that she was referring to in her presentation. Maybe I was one of the nice ones.
I mean, I would love to hear more, but I assume that you wouldn't have been invited here if you were not one of the nice ones.
Maybe it's just because I have so much dirt on Jay because I've known her for so long.
That must be what it is. You have something on her. I'm wondering, Jay and Tori, would this be an okay time to ask if anyone in the room has questions or
Yes,
comments that they'd want to share?
that would be fine with me. And I also wanted to say that if people have questions afterwards, I know my email wasn't listed in the oh, it is listed right there. Perfect. Okay, I was gonna say you can always ask Jay and she can put you in contact with me. But yeah, any questions that Jay or I could answer?
Tori, I'm wondering, would you share a little bit about what drew you to this work?
Okay. I have a terrible connection. I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great.
Okay. I'm a family resources coordinator in the Early Support for Infants and Toddlers program. My daughter's a graduate of that program, and she's autistic and has a significant kind of communication or speech delay. Um, and so, Jay, we met you at the ice cream social at Meadowcrest a few years back. And I think it was just so impactful for her to see, role models and people who represent the community. Um, and I was curious if you have plans to write a book about your story, if you have written a book, or even a kid's book, I would love. Just kind of curious if you have any plans to write.
I love that idea.
I'm gonna say I love that question/prod.
Write something.
Harper is ready for a change if you are available.
Jay says she's done writing now that grad school is over. Fair, but I do think you have a story to tell, Jay. I do agree with that. You need a scribe again to do that writing for you. So I don't know if you caught this, Annika, and what Jay was saying, but I do really recommend Shanita's book, Caleb Has Something to Say. If you haven't read it already, it's she wrote it inspired by her son, Caleb, who I'm sad to say passed away a week or so ago.
Oh,
So we're all
no.
kind of especially sad about that.
Yeah.
But the book is beautiful and a really sweet story about people who are non-speaking.
Yeah, thank you. I'll look at that.
Yeah.
We really like the Day with No Words from Tiffany Hammond. That we were able to meet her at a book signing down at the Sensory Tool House. So that's been really, really good.
I think it's likely Shanita would be very open to talking to you, not now, but in a few months. If you guys
Okay.
want to ever talk to another author or parent.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. I guess another question too is just for the group about supporting parents of young children in presuming competence. A big part of my role is supporting the transition from ESIT to, the school district. And so sometimes I have to remain neutral and just, explain, that early supports can be a lot different than what the school districts are able to offer and accommodate. Um, and so just sort of one of the parent to parent families I'm working with right now, Rachel, or the
Oh, like
parent
so who
partner.
you're a helping parent match with?
Yes, just
Mhm.
thinking how a lot of times schools are not presuming competence and how to support that in the IEP and goal writing, and when it's exhausting educating on behalf of the community, or if any of you have tips on how to support parents in advocating for their children, for others to presume competence.
Such a great question.
That is a wonderful question. I appreciate that. I've got a couple. And just and it's terrible, but as you say, you just have to advocate, 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 and really don't stop talking until you're blue in the face to the school people to
Mhm.
have them understand that if something's fallen through the cracks or whatever. And the more hard evidence that you can get and the more professionals you can get involved to be able to say something on behalf of said human. It took me about 10 minutes to realize how capable Jay was when I actually slowed down to let her say what she had to say. And then I would have been more than happy to speak till I was blue in the face to school district people about how capable she was and what accommodation she might need, or just get the other professionals involved to actually do the testing to determine what need she truly had. And so that's my advice to any other parent, is really advocate for the testing
Mm.
and get concrete, hard, objective data to support decisions that are made by the school districts, especially if they are not supportive of children because of the assumptions.
Mm. I think that's a great answer. I really love that because I had such a different Jay, do you have anything you want to say to this? No. Like the thing that comes to my mind is that we hear often from disabled adults that what they wished they had when they were younger were adult versions of themselves to know. And I think that's really true also for parents, that if parents could meet adults who share the diagnosis with their kid, I don't want, like you said, every person with cerebral palsy is different. And we wouldn't want to say to a parent, your child is going to grow up to be like Jay. Like we don't know that, and we don't want to imply that. But I think the more adults who share that diagnosis with the child, the more the parent is likely to observe the wide range of ways and not just jump to one conclusion, I think. So that's what comes to my mind. But I love the data too, because it's so irrefutable, right? Like that really, my way gives you some idea, but the data gives you some concrete proof. Jay, I don't know, are you composing a message? No, okay. Annika, did that answer your question?
Yes, that's helpful, I think.
Okay. I see this issue in the autism
Hard
community too. Oh,
yeah, when they're younger, it's kind of hard
mhm.
in the age group too. So yeah, just having a lot of role models and then the data. I love that.
Yeah.
Resources are helpful. I can share with families too. So thank you.
I also think that educating parents on some good keywords to use when they're talking to school districts, like free an appropriate public education and, you know, ADA and IDEA. And anytime you start throwing around like, oh, there's a law backing what what I'm asking for, and you could, because school districts really don't like to get sued. And I'm not saying that you should threaten lawsuit, but if you, I just know that my experience with many families has been when I educate them with some of the language that they can use, that school districts take them more seriously and realize that just some of these families will not go away with just a simple single denial, and they'll come back, and as soon as some of the parents started using the buzzwords, school districts really started giving their children the things that they were really should have been giving all along. And then finally it woke them up to like, okay, let's provide these services, not because we have a difficult parent, but because that's the right thing to do, and this child deserves it anyway, and truly needs the support to be as successful in the classroom and life as they can be.
And it's interesting. I like almost interpreted your question differently, Annika, because like convincing the school team of your child's capabilities, or, you know, or of your own capabilities is one thing. But I was thinking of like parents having to know it and understand it before they're ready to advocate. Like, I think so many parents underestimate the capacity and the capabilities of their kids. I know I do. My child is autistic, and I often have found myself believing he can't do things only to learn later that he sure can. So like my answer was more about helping the parents internalize that message before they can even start to advocate outside of themselves. But anyway, just thought it was kind of an interesting different interpretation.
There's a lot of different ways, because it's hard to say. You have to show that your child has, you know, the disability to get the support that you need, but you also want to show how extremely competent, you know, your child is at the same time. So it's like you're in this like catch-22 position as a parent and advocate for them. And this year, my daughter's one-on-one parent educator is autistic, and just having somebody who she relates, you know, like a role model who understands her, and was like huge. You know, just not feeling like I had to advocate as much in her presence was really nice. You know, just trying to set up opportunities for her to meet with other, you know, autistic, neurodivergent, non-speaking community members who are, you know, older than her or younger than her. It's been really helpful. But yeah, just, you know, with trying to get support through DDA or schools, or just like showing like that proving that you need the support, but also wanting them to, like, I just advocated. She was the only in general education setting for a very small amount of time, you know, and they were counting recess and lunch. And so I was like, you know, I know and so now she writes her first and last name, and is reading on grade level in kindergarten. And it was like they didn't tell in the beginning of the year, they assumed that she couldn't. And so they put her in a resource room all day, and just, you know, it's like, I just felt like I just fought and fought and fought. So if we would just, like you said, start out presuming competence, and let them show you differently, I think would just be better for all around. So yeah, I really like what you said, Jay, was just really like moving for me.
Love that. I mean, so we joke a lot about like how people say to disabled people, you're so inspiring, and how like empty of a thing that is. And we don't like to say that. But I also will say, I do find Jay's story inspiring, not in a generic all disabled people are inspiring for just waking up in the morning kind of way. But like, I do think to have, well, there are a number of barriers, and all, like, you know, not being new to the country and being non-speaking and all of that. But like, to have to start your life by convincing everyone around you of your own capability, and to be able to do that effectively, I am very inspired by that portion of your story, by your whole story. Any other?
Yeah, sorry, Jay. I didn't mean to.
No. You didn't. I wasn't calling you out on that.
Okay.
At all. Not at all. Your comments were beautiful. We hear that kind of generically a lot.
Yes.
Like, and I don't know if you've ever watched the Stella Young talk about inspiration porn. It's a really
Yeah.
great
Yeah, I think
video.
you showed that. Yeah.
Yeah, we probably did. So that's what that's all I was getting at. Like,
Yes.
I think, you know, in an effort to avoid being insulting and saying everybody inspires us, we might forget to tell the people who really inspire us that they actually do. So
Yes,
I appreciate
I do identify as part of the autistic community too myself. So
that.
I just throw that out there. Yeah, I definitely didn't mean that at all, but I just meant personally, just like resonated with me. So
Yeah.
thank you.
I think there's also like so much to be said for hope. I think for a lot of us, when we are given a diagnosis, or our child is given a diagnosis, it could feel like a hopeless situation, or like hope is lost. And to meet people who are thriving with a disability and are living their lives and finding ways to use their body to the best of their abilities, and working with the limitations, I think hope comes back, and that's beautiful. So go ahead, Ramona.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't mean this as a prompt, but because I always forget to post the survey, I wanted to share that there is a survey for folks if they want to take the class. And I went ahead and stopped the share since I think we're through the slides. Tori, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit, how is it in an organized way, like how do colleges work with people who want to go into these different fields? How do they teach them around sort of like assuming people are going to do what they're going to do, and assuming competence? Like, is that part of the curriculum at all, or is that something that, you know, professionals in training discuss and think about?
I think it should be part of the training. I know that when I was going to graduate school in physical therapy, that my instructor who taught the pediatric physical therapy course, which is where the CP part came in, just because since it is a childhood onset, it went into the peds course. So we learned about it at that point, but I don't specifically remember well, I do remember hearing the one, if you've seen one child with CP, you've seen one child with CP. And I think the education at that university the whole time was just kind of we don't make assumptions about anybody with a disability. And so it had nothing to do with a child with cerebral palsy. It was just that was a human with a disability. So let's figure out what their abilities are and kind of go from there. And I feel like that was clearly lost on a lot of educators, as it sounds like Annika's child and Jay herself, you know, just stuck them in LRC classrooms right off the bat, and just these assumptions that are made, whether it's because they're nonverbal or whatever else it might be, that there's an incapability. And I just think that I wish that educators, paraeducators, whoever interacted with these children would take a little bit of time to figure out what capabilities actually are, and then be able to work on, oh, let's get you services and resources to actually really flourish. Because clearly it's not as easy for you as it is for a lot of the other students in this school or whatever, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. And so I think that it's just a real travesty that there are some people out there that do make some generalizations and assumptions based on, very frequently, I feel like it comes down to the language and voice expression. And if you don't speak, therefore you must not be very smart. And it breaks my heart to think of so many people who still make that assumption.
Yeah.
And so I think that I just wish there were more people out there that could help with assistive communication devices, even the super low tech, frustrating letterboards that take a long time. But if you have somebody who's patient and doesn't keep filling in the words for you,
Unless they ask you to, like Jay does.
right. Or if you ask permission, I feel like I might have done that. Do you mind if I help complete the word for you? And then you can say yes or no. And then if you say no, I'll shush and let you finish spelling whatever word it is you want to say, unless it's a naughty word that you're speaking to me. But but yeah, that's kind of my thought, though, is that there are just assumptions made across all providers, and it breaks my heart.
So then a follow-up with a question, for the good of the world out there, how soon should people consider introducing some sort of assisted communication?
I think as early as the child is physically able to use it.
Thanks.
And even little picture boards, even simple things like yes, no responses, it's pretty easy to have a green or red thing and teach children yes, no, more. Thinking all the way back to like very early development, and what are some of the first signs that parents teach their typically developing children, and the mores and the pleases and maybe even sorry or toilet, or some of those basic needs. Can we have those on little signboards? And it doesn't have to be words, it can be cute little pictures, and I've seen great success with those at very young ages as well, for some basic needs. And then as you start to learn more, you can start to figure out and get to know the child more. You can start to tell that that child is ready for more words and more complexity with whatever that communication device is that they're using. And it comes the point where it is so slow to articulate what you're trying to say that adding technology to it and getting an SLP or augmentative assistive technology specialist involved to figure out, oh, this actually would be quicker or more efficient, or maybe just simply less frustrating. Doesn't matter the speed, it matters the level of frustration and the willingness for the individual to output what they want to say without getting so frustrated that they just want to basically stop talking, in my opinion.
Thank you very much for sharing your opinion. Really appreciate it.
Any other questions or thoughts from the crowds that we have gathered here today?
I think there needs to be a lot more social media blasts with people who have communication issues, and like teaching the public in general that if you're patient, to let somebody wait and put in an answer to a device, that it will come. And it's sort of on the same line, but also a little bit of a tangent that I'm going to tell the story because I feel like you might appreciate it. We had another individual that came to our class at UW in the pediatrics class who also uses an AAC device, and a student had asked him a question, and he was putting in his answer and putting a lot of thought into it. And he, very similar to Jay, very intelligent, has a degree, full-time job. And he was just taking a long time to put it, but I looked around the room and the students were all on their own phones or computers. And so I had a little teachable moment about how rude that was. And yes, the awkward staring, waiting for an answer is kind of difficult as well, but it it doesn't give you
That's what it
license.
takes to communicate with this person.
Exactly,
Yeah.
you learn.
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
I got a lot of negative feedback for giving them negative feedback about that, and I don't care. I
Right.
would I would
Right.
do it again in a heartbeat. And I did ask the individual, like, do you mind if I interrupt your wordsmithing right now to address what's going on to the class? Because I could tell that he saw what was going on and he gave me the full on permission. So I think the students might have felt like I was talking over him when they didn't see
Oh.
me ask his permission to
Mm.
address the bigger issue in the room at the time. But yeah, so I just think that I wish there was a lot more people out there that interacted with people in public to just teach people, because a lot of it I think is the unknown. And we don't know the etiquette for how do we wait for somebody to form a sentence or an answer that takes a little bit longer. Because I feel like the public in general is good about waiting for about 1.5 seconds for an answer before they get annoyed that you're taking too long. And that's just not enough.
Love that. Thank you. That seems like a great note to wind things down then. Ramona, you're muted.
I was going to say, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
There you go. I love it.
Thank you,
Sounds great.
everybody, for joining us, and I hope you can check out other classes in the series.